You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got these massive souls.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast. If you've not watched or listened to the Brighton Review podcast, we are now available on video on YouTube via all the links on our socials and indeed where you're listening to this podcast. If you want to stay listening, you're more than welcome, but as I say, the opportunity to watch the podcast instead of just listen to it is there. You are now watching or listening to our Chelsea preview podcast, Friday night, 8 p.m, Sky Sports, if you've not got a ticket to go. I'm Kev, I'm your host as always, and I'm joined once again by the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe and the Trust Chairman Tony Murray. Gents, Game 2 of the Premier League. Tony, another big club, supposed Big Six club, spent God knows how much money, big ground, Friday night, under the lights. Should be a great one.
Should be a great one, but I remember Chelsea when they were in Division 2 only struggling to get 7,000 at home, mate, so they'll go back a long way. But it should be a good night. Hopefully we'll have learnt the lessons from Brighton.
Yeah, I guess, James, when the fixtures come out, you know, there's this supposed Big Six, isn't it? This is the first time that we're playing one of them. I guess you could argue we've actually played a Big Six and we're no longer playing a Big Six, but we'll leave that argument for another day. Either way, Chelsea away, it's one of those iconic grounds in England, isn't it? And they're one of the supposed iconic clubs, albeit one that's made its way through, you know, financial benefactors rather than the way that we've done it.
Yeah, I wouldn't call Chelsea iconic. For me, I'm with Tony. There'll be a lot of Chelsea fans out there that don't remember that they were a bit of a tin pot club. Certainly not the pride of London, which seems to be sloganed all around their ground and everything.
I thought that was Arsenal.
Well, there you go. They've decided that they're the pride of London. But no, listen, Abramovich came in, spent loads of money, put them where they were, got Mourinho in obviously as well, but. They've been taken over by this new guy who I don't know what the point of FFP is if they're going to spend the amount of money that they have been spending. You know, if the last two signings they've just spent more than it's probably going to cost to build Power Court on two players.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. There was a thing on social media where they posted the amount of money that Chelsea have spent against the amount of money that Luton has spent this summer, and then they're near. Are they near $1 billion? Is £986 million near $1 billion? I don't know. It's too much for me to even compute. But yeah, it's they are a big club in the sense that they expect to be in the top six, I think, and they've bought expecting to be probably higher than that into the Champions League and maybe even challenging. But in terms of a big club, not for me. But you know, they're going to be favourites, and they will expect to win.
Controversy, as always, guaranteed on the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast. Any complaints, divert them to the Lutonian. We're not interested.
Don't do that. Yeah, if you're a 12-year-old that didn't know football existed before 1992, don't bother.
Fair dues. Tony, 45 previous meetings between Luton and Chelsea, 14 wins for Luton, 12 draws, 19 defeats. The three most recent defeats have all been in the FA Cup, two of which pretty recently, obviously 2 seasons ago. Chelsea were the visitors, Kenilworth Road, 3-2 in that game after Luton led 2-1 at half-time. Prior to that, during COVID season, when nobody could go, we lost 3-1 at Stamford Bridge. And of course, we all know the first one of those 3 meetings when we lost 2-0 at Wembley Stadium on, well, Kerry Dixon's best performance for Chelsea, I would argue. But
Yeah.
Definitely hoping that the tables turn this time around.
Oh, I really hope so. I don't think in those 2 of those games, the most recent 2, I don't think we disgraced ourselves against Chelsea. With a bit more luck, we could have done better out of that. And They're always, eventful games because they're so close to us, aren't they? I mean, it's. One of my best friends is a Chelsea season ticket holder, and you talk to him, he remembers those days in Division 2, and he hates all the new wave coming to Chelsea, the prawn sandwich brigade, as he calls them. And he tells me, he said they're all like day trippers. He said you'll sit in the stand and he's watching the game, and he said you'll see them round, they spend more time on their phones than they do actually watching the game, and unfortunately it's a sad sign of the times, isn't it? But no, I think Friday night, I think Chelsea will know they've been in a game, and I'm just hoping that all the Luton fans will be up for this one like they were at Brighton.
Yeah, I'm sure they will be. James, you were at both of the two recent cup games. Obviously, the one down there where you was talking to yourself because there weren't many of you there, and the home game, where in particular the home game, we gave more than a good account of ourselves. But do you think that the fact that a lot of players that played that night will possibly be playing in this game will kind of benefit us? So we kind of know what we're going into here, whereas against Brighton, we hadn't played them in God knows how long. There was so much sort of, not fear of the unknown, but there was the unknown, and no one really, it's like that Mike Tyson quote, isn't it? Everyone has a plan until they get punched on the chin, and, we did get punched on the chin, but now we've kind of had that, and, the familiarity, do you think that might help us on Friday night?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to learn from every experience that you play in the Premier League. Otherwise, you are destined for the drop. And so Luton have got to learn quickly. But those games in the FA Cup, they run them quite close, especially at Kenilworth Road. I don't really count the one in the COVID season because, I was there sat in an empty Stamford Bridge. But the one at Kenilworth Road, when the atmosphere was electric, sort of shows the power of the ground and what it can do for the home team, and the start was fantastic, and Burke's goal was wonderful. I don't think you can read too much into it because that was under Nathan Jones, now under Edwards, and Chelsea are under Mauricio Pochettino, and they've virtually wholesale changed their side, really. I know Luton have brought in 10 players, but there's still a core of those players that have got us up to the Premier League, whereas as Chelsea, they've got rid of 15 so far, brought in 13, I think. They've got rid of Mason Mount, who's the connection to the fans and the club and the academy, and they've brought in, Caicedo for 115 million, I think it would be.
I hope he plays like he did at the weekend.
Well, yeah, exactly. Give away a penalty.
He seems to be desperate to play against Luton, doesn't he? Because, I mean, we were always going to catch up with him eventually. He obviously didn't play against us for Brighton, but lo and behold, game 2, there he is.
Yeah. I mean, in a certain way, Luton and Chelsea are kind of in the same boat, but shopping in different supermarkets, as Nathan Jones used to say. They've both got players and teams that they need to bed in and get used to each other. And as we record today, and Edwards has been on Sky Sports talking about Chelsea and said that they might not be at their best at the moment, might not have hit a right rhythm. And that's probably the ideal situation to face them in. That's a chance, that's a chink in the armour for Luton to try and exploit. Because if they play to their potential, and that's what they've kind of bought, that's what Gary Neville was talking about on Monday Night Football, that Chelsea have paid all this money for potential, which, obviously Luton the potential is one of the things they look for. But when you spend all that amount of money, and particularly the Chelsea fans and the new ones that Tony was talking about, they expect success. And so if they don't get it, then, there's a high chance that those fans could get on their back, and you've almost got to treat it like a cup final, a cup game, where you've got to frustrate them and get the crowd, a bit nervous, because they all think that they should beat Luton, and there'll be a healthy portion of them think that they should absolutely batter Luton. Yeah. And if it turns out that doesn't happen, like for the first half an hour, that's cup game territory, and that's probably where you've got to try and aim, not your tactics. I mean, I expect Edwards is going to come up with better tactics than that, but aim your attention at these big games, these big clubs that expect to steamroll you. And I think that's probably a good place.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that, James. We've got to, we're going to be on the back foot for a lot of the game. They're going to have most of the possession, so we need to churn out a championship style performance. Where we dug in and we held out and had to scrap and fight for what we got in those games. And I think that's the way it's going to be on Friday night. We need a tighter defence. We need people to up their defensive games, and we need Marvellous to start showing us his form from last season as well.
I suppose, really, if you look at the weekend game with Chelsea, West Ham did what Luton should be aiming to do, because they didn't have the ball, West Ham, but when they got into vital positions and they scored the goals, and they frustrated Chelsea because they aren't clicking. They had a lot of the ball, and Raheem Sterling played particularly well, which is one of the danger men that Luton have got to look out for. But they've got a new striker who looks lightning, but maybe if he goes 2, 3, 4, 5 games without scoring, they've had so many number 9s, that club, that are duffers as soon as they put on a blue shirt. It could be one of those situations, and there's all these little mini battles and mini wins you can get against Chelsea, we should be trying to get, that could add up to the sum total of a decent result, and that's probably a decent way to look at it.
Yeah, when you say we shop in different supermarkets, I mean, this is literally Harrods against Poundland, isn't it, really? I mean, Harrods are right on their doorstep, and Poundland, well, maybe Aldi, maybe not Poundland. But, we'll come on to some of those key battles in a minute. But before we do, let's have a look at the potential 2 teams for the game. Tony, do you envisage Rob Edwards making many changes from the Brighton game?
I don't think so. Because he's got to give the side that played a chance to bed in and get to know one another. I think perhaps maybe in view we're up against, you might see a role for Alan Campbell in there, I think, chasing them down and helping us to win the ball back. But, maybe playing Morris up front on his own. But I don't envisage too many changes on that. I don't.
What about yourself, James? Do you see any changes from that Brighton side? I mean, obviously, I suppose the first thing we have to consider, who will be in goal. Since Brighton, Tim Krul's come in. Kind of strikes me as the kind of fellow who's probably not left Norwich to come here and sit on a bench. But equally, I don't suppose Kaminski's left Blackburn to sit on a bench. So who do you see starting in goal, and do you see any other changes sort of in front of that?
I think it'd be Kaminski, because Luton have been trying to get that experienced goalkeeper all summer, haven't they? That's why they were linked with Begovic and they were linked with Heaton, to try and get that Premier League experience to come in. Tim Krul is very experienced. He's played in the Premier League. He's an international player, but he also has been playing second fiddle at Norwich as well. So, 2 championship clubs, were Blackburn and Norwich, when Thomas Kaminski was the number 1 choice for them, and he's come in and he's played the first game, and it's not unfeasible that Krul could come in, but he's only been there for a couple of days at this point as we record. So I think you keep it, and you keep the same, particularly when Kaminski hasn't done anything particularly to be cast aside. I know you look at 4 goals. One was a penalty, one was a penny, massive gaff that killed the game. The other one the last one he had no chance because it was slid across the box. And so, it's one of those where I think it would be really unfair for him to come out, and might sort of unsteady the ship as well, because he's a new player as well. You've got to give him that, and he's got a bed in. If you start chopping and changing now, I don't know if that really benefits anyone. So I'd stay with Kaminsky, I think.
Whoever it is, they can wear the same training top, can't they? Because it's TK versus TK, so that was forward planning. That was in front of them. See any changes in front of them? Perhaps I've noticed in the videos that have been doing the rounds that Reece Burke's back in training. I'm also pretty sure, without giving too much away, that he played one of the 30 minutes against Arsenal behind closed doors. So he could be knocking on the door. Obviously, he's got recent previous against them as well.
I think it's probably going to be a bit too soon, isn't it? Considering his... I want to see Reece Burke back. We've talked about him many a times in previous seasons of the podcast that we really like him. He's a little bit made of glass, and that's what we've got to try and overcome. I think if you rush him back too much, then maybe that could be detrimental for him. But, if Luton need something there, then I wouldn't be disappointed to see him on the bench. I think everybody would. You need as many defenders to be able to pick from as possible. It's a bit threadbare going into the Brighton game, but I wouldn't say that he'd start. But if he's on the bench, then that bodes well for them.
I mean, pretty much everyone at the club's on the bench these days if they're not playing, aren't they? It gets longer and longer and longer, these benches. Tony, you mentioned maybe playing Morris up front, but is there a role perhaps for Jacob Brown, maybe slightly deeper?
Yeah, I think so, because he's got the pace and to perhaps trouble that Chelsea defence, getting the knockdowns from Carlton, and he's also puts himself about, and I think that's what we've got to do against them. We've got to rough them up, let them know that we're there, and I think Jacob showed in that first game he's got enough, and there's potential there, and a bit of pace about him, and I think that's what we're going to need, because I can't see us getting too many chances on Friday night. So any that we do get, we've got to make them count.
Yeah, we do indeed. I mean, to be fair, West Ham didn't create millions of chances, but they did score 3 goals. Mm-hmm. One other person to mention, James, signed, well, I suppose technically signed from Chelsea, even though he was a free transfer at the time. Ross Barkley, I don't think anyone expects him to start the game. I think that would be slightly too soon, but he could probably be on the bench, having been here 2 or 3 weeks now in training and everything, and there's a man with a point to prove if he comes off the bench.
Yeah, I think he's got to be in the bench. If he's fit, he's got to be on the bench. We don't know the status of that, but he's had the almost 2 weeks since the Brighton game, and he signed just a little bit before that. So, hopefully he's a bit more up to speed. The fact is the lad's got Premier League experience, hasn't he? And that's going to be so vital. If we talked about when he signed, if you get the Ross Barkley from Everton, what a player he's going to be for Luton.
Not the one from Chelsea.
No, but so many players go to Chelsea and don't cut it or sort of
hopefully we see 11 of them on Friday night.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they signed that many players. It's probably not unsurprising that many of them would not really make the grade. But yeah, I thought it was a strange move because Everton was boyhood club, wasn't it? But it didn't really work out. But that's part of Luton's transfer policy, is signing young and hungry players. He's not that anymore, but he's young enough. He's in the prime. Point to prove, though.
Yeah.
If anyone's got a point to prove, it'll be him. And if he gets a chance against Chelsea, that's one hell of a point to prove.
And if he scores, the celebrations will be rather interesting, to say the least. Tony, let's move on to Chelsea. They've got 6 injuries by all accounts, which means they were down to just 604 players to choose from on Friday.
Few as that.
On Friday night. Yeah, I gave up counting at 604, to be honest. It was getting way too long. I mean, the key ones, if you like, that are out injured, Reece James would be their first choice right back because he's their captain. And I'm not even going to get this wrong, but Carney Chukwuemeka, I think is how you pronounce it, went off injured against West Ham on Sunday. He's now had knee surgery, so unless he's had a new knee put in there, he's not going to be playing on Friday night. So they've got to do a little bit of jiggery pokery. It probably means they've gone out and spent another £250 million, but they've got injuries to overcome.
True, but the other side of that coin is any players coming in will want to make a name for themselves and show that they've got a point to prove. sometimes I look at teams like Chelsea who've got these bigger squads, and you think, how can they keep all those players happy? What's the
150 grand a week will do that. I suppose,
true.
won't it?
Eight years of security.
But
if not-
even I'm trying to think, who was the player a few years ago that wouldn't move on and whatever, and they were paying him something like 150 grand a week, and he was just happy to sit on the bench. I can't remember his name.
Bogard or something.
Yeah, that was
wasn't
it. Yeah, I don't think there's too many players like that. I mean, they all want to prove a point and have a place in the team, because any professional worth their salt would rather be playing, or if you can't get in the Chelsea side on a regular basis, I want to show another team that I'm worth coming in for. So there's going to be a bit of that, but I think we're playing them at a good time. As we've already said, that you've got them in the situation where they're still bedding in players, and they're trying to work together and get that team ethic going and working for each other. So I think that's going to even us up a little bit. But I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, if you look at them on an individual basis throughout their squad, they've got better quality. You can't argue with that. You know, it just depends how they play on the night. And there's an old saying that said, football's played on grass, not on paper. And, these valuations, it's been done so many times over the past that fees and reputations can go out the window. I mean, nobody thought 10 years ago that we'd be a Premier League side in the FA Cup when we were a non-league. And that happened. So these things happen. I can't see any reason why we can't do it, although I'd be happy with a point, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, James, if you look through their team from Sunday, you had Robert Sanchez in goal. I mean, they started with a back three, didn't they, against West Ham, but soon realised that all three of them put together were no use. Colwell, Thiago Silva, and my friend, who I'm really going to enjoy watching on Friday night. Well, Disasi is his name, but they should have called him Disaster, because, I mean, he had an absolute mare against West Ham, and he wasn't much better against Liverpool in the first game either. I mean, the starting side had Conor Gallagher and Enzo Fernandez in the centre of midfield, but we're fully expecting Moises Caicedo to come in, potentially for Gallagher. The wing-backs were Chilwell and Gusto, who, well, I mean, he didn't look much better than his friend Dizazi. And then the forward three was Chukwuemeka, which I've just said he's definitely out injured. It looks like Michaela Mudryk is going to come in for him, another £100 million player. Nicholas Jackson up front, the striker that you referred to earlier, and of course Raheem Sterling. So, I mean, it's pretty tasty on paper, to be fair, but, still only got a draw and a pretty heavy defeat, really, against West Ham to show for it.
Yeah, I mean, when you line them up like that, it's they should be beating Luton. But the point is that most of the players are fairly new, not quite used to each other. That's not to say that they're going to have all the possession again. I mean, they had it against West Ham, and what we've seen from Mauricio Pochettino's side, Spurs side anyway, when they were in their pomp, was that they run for days and they're very, very physical. But
I suspect this lot won't run for days, though, to be fair. I mean, if you're coining 150 large ones a week, I'm sorry, but I ain't running for, that'll do me.
Yeah, I mean, it's different worlds, isn't it? It really is. But, against West Ham, Raheem Sterling looked back to the player that he potentially was at Man City. He just fell off a cliff last season, but then so did Chelsea, didn't they, really? So that probably wasn't unexpected when you put it in the team context. But if he plays like he did against West Ham, then there's a real threat there, because he can really break through the lines and he's got the pace and he can dribble past people. If he's anything like before Pep got hold of him, then he doesn't know where the goal is, and that'd be useful. So it could be one or two ways there. But he is a star player. He's a star player, and he's still fancied by Gareth Southgate in the England setup as well. So you can't discount him in any shape or fashion. But there's a lot of players around him that are new. new to the country, new to the league. And like I already said, like Jackson, if he does take a while to bed in and get his first goal, and hopefully it takes a few more games than this one, and there's precedent at Chelsea for that to be a flop situation. So yeah, we hope that there's many of those on Friday night against Luton. But the dangers are all there. But I think that you've really got to play on this aspect of them being a new side that has been hastily put together for a lot of money. The pressure's really on them. Really, they paid that amount of money. They've got to be finishing in the top 4, because if they don't, and they don't get the European money, then maybe in a season's time they will start falling foul of FFP. I don't know how they're not now, but well, I do actually. If you listen to Simon Jordan on TalkSport's explanation of it, he did a very good explanation of it. I mean, I don't agree with it, but not that I don't agree with the explanation. I don't agree with Chelsea's ability to be able to do that. There shouldn't be those loopholes, or there shouldn't be this way to do it. It's not really on a level playing field, but we are where we are, and they'll just be expected to beat Luton. So it's one of those where that can add pressure to them as well.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, Martin O'Neill made a good point on TalkSport actually, where he said this Chelsea side have to finish in the top 4 this season, because potential is the word that Gary Neville used on Monday Night Football, and I understand where he's coming from. But as Martin O'Neill said, if potential was part of the game plan, then there was no need to sack Potter. So, they've brought in Pochettino to finish in the top 4. Tony, let's go through some key battles quickly. One that could be defining is Carlton Morris against this Chelsea defence. If you look at Sunday, Michail Antonio, who's probably similar in stature and sort of characteristics to Morris, he basically dominated all 3 of these Chelsea defenders on his own. So if Morris can do the same thing, we could have some serious sway at the top end of the pitch.
Yeah, and that Carlton will give 100%. He'll get stuck in, and he won't let any reputation phase him or anything like that. So I think that's great, and I think he's the best player we've had leading the line for a long time, and I think he'll put himself about. I was pleased that he scored, so that'll do him the world of good, and what you're going to get from Carlton Morrison. They're going to have to watch him like a hawk. Because probably he hasn't got the pace that Raheem Sterling's got or whatever, but that he can use either foot, and he's good in the air as well, so that's going to be a threat as well. So I'm looking forward to it. I just hope that Chelsea go into this with the teams like Luton attitude, because you know that whatever vocal fans they've got there are going to get on their back if it's not going for them, and that's what we need to do. No, I'm that's one battle I'm looking forward to. And we've got players who can mix it and put pressure on them, so we're not going to be fazed by them at all.
Yeah, if we could get Morris up against Disaster, whatever you want to call him, then I really do think that there's a way in there. Certainly,
we need a bit of the good old-fashioned Danny Hilton shithousery. That's what we need.
Certainly, Antonio showed the way, and I'm assuming someone from the club would have been at the Chelsea West Ham game on Sunday, given that they're our next 2 opponents. James, you've mentioned Raheem Sterling throughout this podcast. Him against Amari Bell down that left-hand side, or indeed Ryan Giles, depending on how wide he plays. That's a big one. We need to cover that threat.
Yeah, absolutely. I see him as their main threat, really. I think that's the way that Pochettino will probably play him, because he knows the English game, and he would have seen him at Liverpool and Man City. And if they can get that Raheem Sterling, and the one that started for England as well, then that's going to be a big boost to Pochettino's way of playing, I think. And what we saw in the West Ham game was that he was that player that was trying to make things happen. And so, yeah, it depends where he goes. When he played for City, it was hard to mark him because he was all over the place. If he wants to play in one position, maybe centrally, maybe Marvellous can get on him and prevent that. But it is a worry when he gets running on the ball. And I think that Edwards has already spoken about this today. He did a piece on Sky Sports where he talked about the basics of getting closer, getting tighter, doing the running earlier and the work earlier.
Cut the supply out as well.
Yeah, I think they've got to do that. I think that, you know, there was possibly an element of naivety in that aspect of letting them have the ball. It was more like it was a championship mentality. They did that in the championship; it worked so well. But the difference in this league is that if there's even like a millimetre of space, somebody can pick a pass through it. And Brighton particularly, they were fantastic at that. So it's about those lessons to learn.
I think Brighton are a better side than Chelsea, to be honest with you.
Oh, at this moment in time,
Yeah.
undoubtedly.
Oh yeah, there must be. I mean, Chelsea are taking every single Brighton player that draws breath at the minute, aren't they? I mean, you know, I fully expect them to buy the stadium and move that up to London at some point as well. It's everything must go there. The other battle I'm looking forward to, and I think could also determine the outcome of this game, is Chong against Caicedo. Caicedo has a serious price tag on his shoulders right now, and he's got to live up to that. Yes, he's got this buzzword potential, but when you're brought for 115 million quid, you're brought to deliver now, not deliver in amongst your 8-year contract. And he looked pony on Sunday. He looked like a player who had no pre-season, had only just met his teammates. And really, you just wonder exactly what he's all about in that Chelsea side, because at Brighton, he had a hell of a lot of runners from all angles. He basically only had to get the ball and give it to someone else. But Chelsea play 2 in the centre of midfield, not 3. So, you know, it's a completely different job. And if Chong can get, you know, the upper hand on him and get the crowd on Caicedo's back, and, you know, Pochettino has doubts over him. He's got another 15 midfielders that are likely to come on the bench. If we can dominate that particular showing, you know, and Chong can get away from Caicedo, get the ball into Morris, get the ball into whoever the strike partner may be, Brown, Elijah, Giles, Kabore. It really is a battle that we can get through, and I would trust Chong to do that. So I really do think there's a lot of pressure on Caicedo. And while I like him as a player, I'm just not convinced that that price tag's going to do him any favours whatsoever, particularly in light of the fact that Declan Rice, for just 10 million quid less, is already shining for Arsenal. So hopefully we can win 2 or 3 of those key battles, and that could be the outcome to the game. As always, on these preview podcasts, we're going to end with a score prediction. And I'll come to you, Tony, as this is your first match preview podcast. What's your prediction for the score on Friday night?
I don't really want to give a prediction, if I'm honest, because my attitude is, if we win, fantastic. If we draw, fantastic. If we lose, so what? We're expected to, but
that's all well and good. But what's your score prediction for Friday
night? I know. 1-1.
You see, you've done exactly what I did against Brighton.
1-1.
Can't bear to say that we're going to lose, so it would just go 1-1. James, you did pick Luton to lose against Brighton, not as heavily as we actually did. Same again, or do you see us getting something from this one?
I think there's more in this one for Luton. There's lots of reasons and lots of little threads to pull on that might just unsettle Chelsea and swing it a little bit more in Luton's favour. Not totally. I expect Chelsea to dominate the ball, and maybe Luton don't have a lot of chances, but Tony has stolen my thunder of the 1-1 because that's what I was going to go for.
See, it's not like me to be negative on this podcast at all, but actually I kind of see this game playing out in the same way that the FA Cup game did. I think for an hour we're going to be right in this game. Maybe 65 minutes, 70 minutes even. But the problem we've got now is 70 minutes is still another half an hour to go, and they're bringing £58 million Lavia off the bench. They're bringing £100 million here, there and everywhere. And no disrespect to our substitutes, but because I love them all, but we're bringing Luke Berry off the bench, who's been with us in League Two. You know, we're bringing much sort of lower levelled players as much as they deserve their opportunity. The benches are just not. They're just not comparable. It's as simple as that. So I can see us being right in the game, 1-1, maybe even edging it at some point, because their defence does look like you can really get after it. I mean, Liverpool had a field day against it. They just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net.
I think if we can score first, that's going to, really increase the pressure on them. So, that's could be quite telling.
I certainly see us being in a game for an hour, 70 minutes. But unfortunately, you're looking at another half an hour after that where they're bringing on God knows how many big guns. And ultimately that pressure we might just subside because, we tire, sheer weight of expectation and everything else, and their quality might just ring through. So maybe 3-2 to Chelsea, but I'm really looking forward to the game. I think we will give a really, really, really good account of ourselves. And if we do go down 3-2, there's no shame in that, because this is one of those games, once again, like Brighton away was. Our season does not determine by what happens at Chelsea away. The following game is where our season starts, in essence, not Gillingham, West Ham.
Yeah.
So again, I hate the term free hit, but there's just not as much importance on Chelsea away as there is on some of the other games we're going to come up against this season.
I think you're right there, Kevin. And I think that, these games at Brighton, Chelsea, gives enough of a chance for the side to bed in and start operating as a unit in preparation for when we play those sides that we need to get points off of to stay in the division. So that's how I'm looking at it. Like almost in a way like a pre-season, except it's going to be more competitive. So, I'm like you. I'm not worried if we lose. If we lose, we lose, so be it. But be looking for the points to pick up when we play Everton, when we play West Ham, when we play Crystal Palace.
When we play anyone at home, really, isn't it? It's our home form and those around us away from home that determines it. The boys are going to give everything on the pitch on Friday night. That you can be absolutely guaranteed. If you're one of the 3,050 or so going down there, be loud and proud as you were against Brighton.
We will be.
Make the same amount of noise. The likelihood is that there isn't going to be too much coming from the home end, so we're going to have to make all of the noise ourselves, and I'm sure we will do. Enjoy the evening down in London, win, lose or draw, and let the season start in the game after. But let's hope we can bloody some noses on Friday night on the way too. My thanks, as always, to James Antoni for joining me on this podcast. Our thanks would also like to go to the Hightown Club, who are kindly putting us up this season. If you do hear some background noise whilst we're doing the podcast, that is only because we're at the Hightown Club and it is still open downstairs. So we do apologise for that, but I hope you understand the situation. We also like to say thank you to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our wonderful intro, which we hope you really enjoy. We do, and it's fantastic. And to Ed Smith Creative for giving us all of our designs for this season. If you'd like to be on the podcast, we do have space for another guest. Just drop me an email, media@lutontownsupporterstrust.com, and we'll try and accommodate you as and when throughout the course of the season. In the meantime, if you enjoy the podcast, particularly if you're watching this on YouTube, please do subscribe. Please do rate us. Tell your friends. Tell everyone that we're on YouTube. We want as many people to watch us as is humanly possible. But thank you very much for watching and listening. And come on, you Hatters.
Can you believe it? We are Premier League! Yes!
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.